Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Tech Innovators Spotlight. Today, I am joined by a co-host that you all have seen before, Raquel. Raquel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Raquel Gallivan. I am an Azure specialist here at Microsoft and support Crowdbotics on their exciting journey with Microsoft.
Welcome once again, Raquel. And I'm super excited to have Anand, the CEO of Crowdbotics. Anand, please tell us a little bit about yourself and about Crowdbotics.
Thanks, Vrushali. Thanks, Raquel. It's great to be here. So I'm Anand Kulkarni. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Crowdbotics. So Crowdbotics is a high-growth technology company. We are a startup. In Microsoft parlance, a digital native. What that means is that we are focused on the problem of turning code into requirements, what we call AI-powered modernization. So Crowdbotics exists to deal with this massive problem that exists in the world, probably something that is not a surprise to folks who are in the Microsoft ecosystem, but there's lots and lots of code that exists out there in the world that is out of date, that is running on mainframes, that is running on code or frameworks where there are not enough human engineers left alive who understand really how it works. And there is this overwhelming need in the world to turn that code from legacy code into modern code, to take it from outdated mainframe frameworks like COBOL or Fortran and convert it into more modern systems, modern .NET, modern cloud frameworks, or to take that code that's running on Big Iron and move it up into the cloud so that it can be maintained, supported, and extended. So Crowdbotics uses generative AI to do this. We've been doing this as a problem space. Actually, since 2016, we've built a really unique data set of information about requirements that allows us to do this problem better, faster, and more accurately than almost anyone else in the market. And we're excited to see how far we have taken this technology out into a number of exciting customers. In terms of my own background, serial founder, I've been doing this company since 2016, but ran another company before this one for 6 years in the sales AI space. And before that, I was a PhD over at UC Berkeley, working on AI problems for a long time.
That's fantastic. We have an entrepreneur among ourselves. That's amazing. Thank you, Anand, for the walkthrough. I'll tell you, like my manager, and he didn't ask me to plug this. He's a huge fan of Crowdbotics, and so I was super excited to kind of learn more about how Crowdbotics can solve this problem. Because as you mentioned, app modernization is not new for Microsoft, and we have been trying within our estate when we did the on-prem migration onto cloud, all the way to now. We still have several customers that are in this journey of modernization to onboard onto AI space. I was doing a little bit of research, and I saw like there were some big numbers, like 79% of app mod projects fail, and it's like for $50 billion of IT spend that goes to waste. Shed a little bit of light for our audience in terms of how those numbers came about and what Crowdbotics' role is in order to kind of make it more efficient and not have this waste.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about the scale of the problem first. So when we talk about modernization, we can break this out into a lot of different areas. There's mainframe code. Right now, there's about 800 billion with a B lines of COBOL code, just COBOL, running in production. That's a language that was invented back in the 60s on punch cards that we're still using here today in 2024, running mission critical systems. And when we think about where this code lives, what it's doing, it's actually everywhere in our lives. Credit card transaction processing systems, insurance claims management, medical records, finance and banking. A lot of the core infrastructure that everybody in the world uses day to day is actually powered by and running on these mainframe code bases. And that's a shocking amount of legacy code that is underpinning much of the infrastructure that we are all using unknowingly, which presents this real risk, right, for the world and for society, because if we don't move off of this code, then we have the underlying challenge that someday we'll need to update it. Someday we'll have a mission critical system that we're relying on go down. And we see this happen actually, even in our day-to-day lives. There was a major outage, I believe last year, at one of the major US airlines due to a failure in one of their COBOL systems. And as a result, a lot of passengers were stranded, cost in the many billions of dollars for that organization. And that's an example of the kind of systematic issue that we end up seeing when COBOL code or mainframe code is not migrated on. So when we talk about the numbers there, right, you've got the math. These aren't our numbers. These are published numbers from studies out in the world. You've got a massive amount of spending that is happening right now in the world, specifically on this area of mainframe and existing legacy code up. And that's actually the bulk of where a lot of our IT spending goes. I know in AI terms, there's a lot of enthusiasm right now around net new coding and how we can generate new code and new applications. And that's also great. But it's important to remember the vast majority of where most IT teams and most software engineers spend their time is not in writing brand new software systems. It's actually in working with these existing legacy systems, either to maintain them, to add new features, or in some special cases, migrating them up into the cloud or into new modern systems and modern frameworks where they belong. Of course, the challenge is that it's really easy and important for a lot of teams to think about migrating this code, but it's very expensive and difficult for most companies to actually migrate that code. So if you look at what's actually involved for companies who want to move off of mainframe or even move off of legacy cloud code into more modern cloud frameworks, you can't just start by throwing engineers into the problem and saying, let's get this thing done. You've got to start with this very painful process of understanding what those existing systems actually do, documenting and reverse engineering each element of the business logic, every view, every workflow, every business function that matters for the organization that's running that code. And that's really where the hardest part of the problem is. It's the piece that requires us to systematically understand this code base. So when we ask where modernization projects fail, it's often in that key piece. You've missed a requirement. You've tried to understand what the system did. You missed critical functionality, and there weren't enough people in your organization, subject matter experts, who really understood that code well enough to give you that information in time. So that's a really common way that these problems fail. Of course, the reason Crowdbotics exists is that understanding code is the kind of problem that today's large language models are very good at. And that's actually the reason that we've been able to be so successful with the customers we've brought to this solution.
That's amazing. So you touched on this a little bit by saying, okay, if you continue on the journey that you're at and you don't think of how to modernize it, then you'll run into issues like, okay, if the system is down or security breaches and so on and so forth. Or there are other things that the customer should be thinking about, because you also highlighted, which is what we see across our customer base, is, do we prioritize onboarding onto AI and jumping onto this bandwagon, right? Having, this huge marketing splash of like, we are onboarding. They can't wait for 3 years to modernize and then onboard onto AI. And there is limited budget. Do you help customers with consulting, kind of planning through? Because most of it is just fear, by assuming that it's this giant project that they have to kind of go drive, and they are going to pour in all the resources all at once, and they'll not be able to prioritize anything else, right? So there is a lot of anxiety around, nobody has touched it. Those people don't exist in our companies that were taking care of this or built this, and now we have to do it. Do I really want to be in that C-suite seat to be running into taking this as a big challenge, right? Or should I not rock the boat? What's your philosophy around that, and what's your guidance for those customers?
Okay, so you've asked two really interesting, provocative questions on this one. Number one is whether companies have to think about modernization as competition for their AI initiatives. The second one, I think, is how deep of an investment are they really making here when they talk about modernizing to go AI native, let's say, as an approach. So the first thing I'll note is that AI presents this really unique moment for many organizations who are historically struggling with legacy code. The big one is that there's an understanding really at the C-suite of most organizations that AI can present really tangible opportunities to catch up and accelerate a huge number of their initiatives. Modernization actually doesn't come up as often as it should in those conversations because people are still learning that solutions like
Yes.
Crowdbotics can actually accelerate that process substantially. Once folks realize that, there's a really interesting opportunity, which is to take the AI activities that are looking for ROI inside the organization and pointing them at this giant legacy code base or set of code bases that you see inside your own organization. Generally speaking, it's actually a much more straightforward process than most organizations think. The reason is that we tend to help customers with some of the heavy lifting, as do our counterparts inside the Azure ecosystem who are familiar with Crowdbotics. The real process here of understanding the requirements from a legacy software system is really as simple as connecting the LLM into an existing code base, either using the Crowdbotics SaaS edition or by procuring Crowdbotics via the Azure Marketplace and deploying on tenant. I think in each of those ecosystems, it's really not that big of a lift. We typically see customers who are trying to evaluate Crowdbotics do so in a 2-week process, connecting a code base and extracting out a set of requirements. And for comparison, that's usually a human process inside most teams that takes 6 months to 2 years of requirement capture, a fairly involved process. So the barrier to entry is actually not nearly as big as most teams think. It's often something that you can end up getting your feet wet very quickly and then understanding how to pull this in. Now, AI can do a lot more, of course, when you're looking at what you can do once you've got the requirements out of a system in ways that actually help unlock better ROI for many teams, right? So you can pull in code, you can, of course, extract the requirements, but you can also talk about adding in new features, changing the business logic, reimagining your software system in ways that are very hard to do when you're doing conventional modernization, but become very easy when you're dealing with requirements instead of code.
That's very informative because I didn't. Yes, that's for the most part that's what customer thinks, right? It's 6 months to a year long journey to just even figure out what we are going to do and put milestones in place and then work our way towards it. So it's really refreshing to hear. Now it's kind of down to a few weeks, and the customer should try it out, right? And then decide if it is truly worth it for them to onboard and do it right at the foundation itself. So then when they onboard onto AI, it is much easier and a faster pace than what they might be trying to do with the existing legacy code base, right? Is that a fair way of putting
That's
it?
a great way to think about it. Yes.
Yeah.
Skipping generational technologies is really what I think you're getting at is can you go and embed AI features into the next edition of your application? And the answer is yes. We do see customers do that.
Yeah.
There's a variety of things you can add in when you're reimagining a software system. Adding in AI features is a very common ask that we see among customers.
That's awesome. I know Raquel and you have worked closely on this, and she has a lot of questions.
Yeah. Anand, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into how you're using AI at Crowdbotics. And a first question here, given that we're in the era of AI and your deep background in artificial intelligence, even before starting Crowdbotics, how is AI shaping your offerings to our customers and what value do you see AI bringing to them?
Okay. So Crowdbotics is obviously in this category of vertical AI solutions. And so AI is foundational for what we're doing. For folks who are looking at the AI landscape, you should think about Crowdbotics as a collection of AI models that have been post-trained on specific data that we have about mainframe modernization and legacy cloud modernization that we then use in tandem with each other to perform what is currently the market's best and most accurate extraction of requirements from code. So some things to know about Crowdbotics. First, that means that we are heavy users of the variety of existing models that exist inside Azure's ecosystem. Heaviest one that we use, of course, is Azure's OpenAI service, but we also use solutions like DeepSeek and other models that have been put out there. Llama is another one that we make big use of inside Azure's ecosystem. These models operate in an ensemble. What that means is that we have identified a specific set of sequenced steps that we use to invoke each of these models in turn that drives better results than what you can get by using these models out of the box by themselves. So, for example, we have run several benchmarks against how good Crowdbotics is at understanding a given code base that needs to be modernized. We have accuracy scores and benchmarks that we have used to understand how well a off-the-shelf LLM, like let's say you were to pull out O1, OpenAI's ordinary model, and give it some code. If you can figure out how to fit it into the context window and ask it to explain all the code and requirements. And then we've done the same thing with Crowdbotics, which is a collection of post-trained models that we've put together in a particular sequence. And you can see that there is actually a very substantial difference in accuracy between what Crowdbotics is able to achieve on its first pass, which is something like 80% correct extraction of code requirements, business logic, views, data models from that code base, compared to a default run of something like O1, which produces about a 20% accuracy. So 80 versus 20 means that you are actually pulling out much more useful data on the first pass. And so that's an example of where we see AI at the core of what we're doing. This problem actually would not be solvable without the existence of good AI solutions. But it's not enough to have the large language models in isolation. You have to be able to mitigate many of the gaps about what they don't know using unique data to make them really performant for this problem. And that's something that has been important for us as we develop competitive advantages in the market.
Yeah, it's been incredible to see. I've actually been able to have your team show me the benchmarks between the Crowdbotics trained LLM as well as the using off the shelf, and it's fantastic. I think that just really accelerates developer productivity, and it's really exciting for our customer base. Um, can you share a little bit more about where you see AI taking Crowdbotics in the near and long term? I know now you're using Azure OpenAI as well as you shared you're testing out some of the newer models that are coming out. Would love to hear what's in the pipeline for you.
Okay. So our vision here is that as more and more solutions start to think about and more enterprises start to recognize the utility of AI in addressing modernization, we are going to see more entrants into the market looking specifically at the use of generative AI for modernization. Right now, Crowdbotics has the delightful position of having been the most established company in this space and the one with the highest performing model ensemble in the space. We are currently ahead of the pack. I anticipate that new entrants will emerge to try to catch up, and our strategy here, very explicitly, is to remain in front. We want to have the market-leading accuracy in terms of model performance, in terms of accuracy, and in terms of completeness in extracting out requirements on the widest range of possible frameworks and languages that exist in the market. And strategically, that's where we continue to invest. So both in terms of making sure that our benchmarks show that we are in front, by pushing out more benchmarks into the market that customers can use to understand our performance, and by investing directly in model R&D ourselves to make sure that our post-training network and that the agents that we deploy can continue to take advantage of what is coming out of the market from R&D labs that are working on foundation models. Everyone kind of recognizes that the foundation models are becoming a commodity, which means that as they get better, it's more important for us to have a unique advantage, both in the post-training and in the workflows that we put together to stay in front of the market. And that's a place where right now I expect we've got a lead, and where if you were to talk to us 12 months from now, I'd be able to say, well, I think we've got a runaway lead on top of it.
That's wonderful. Knowing the pace that Crowdbotics moves at, I'm excited to see what's in store. And it really has been such an exciting partnership. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about why you chose Microsoft to partner with and the journey so far?
That's a great question. So I think Microsoft as a partner has been one of the best choices that Crowdbotics has made as we have determined how best to take this technology out and scale it up in the market. I'll point to three things in particular that Microsoft has done very well that influenced our choice in thinking. The first is that Microsoft's go-to-market support inside the enterprise has been decisive for us in our ability to engage with customers where they are currently transacting for enterprise IT decisions. Microsoft has one of the best networks of established and trusted enterprise architects, advisors, and really thinkers who are giving customers correct, accurate, useful, actionable, and high trust information about where they can build and how they can migrate into the cloud. So when we're looking at modernization, really we want to be where our customers are, and where our customers are is inside Azure, talking to Azure specialists, which means that when we want to enter that conversation, being inside Azure Marketplace is an important place to be. The second is that Microsoft has made a commitment from the top to be at the forefront of AI model development and access. Even though Microsoft is not necessarily the one who is making the model, they are making the model available to us and allowing rapid, easy, and effective development in a way that both customers understand and that our R&D teams can make strong use of. And that commitment to AI at the top means that as an AI company, we can trust that the infrastructure choices we've made and the investments we've made inside Azure end up robust and supported over the lifetime of our work inside Azure's customer base. The third one I think that's a hidden advantage is that Azure is so widely trusted inside the public sector and inside global enterprise that we have been able to find really effective security and architectural choices cascading down from our customers through us by default. In places where our customers and us are both using Azure, transactions end up becoming really effective, even for relatively complex deployments. And that's a nice hidden advantage that you can only appreciate if you've done things in the bad old days before Azure, where you had to go and mail CDs around or deploy things in ways that were nasty into the enterprise. And I think Azure has somewhat uniquely put in really effective rails to speed up that process of going out and taking the latest and greatest technology from a startup like us and putting it directly into a customer's tenant or VPC.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much synergy between our two companies. I mean, you first spoke about the Azure Marketplace and Crowdbotics being available for customers there. I think just in terms of both long-term established enterprise customers with legacy code who are looking to modernize, and then even your innovative startups who are looking to build applications faster and faster, both are just such a great fit for Crowdbotics. And so it's been really cool to see as we continue to develop the partnership, what that looks like for our joint customers. One area that I'd love for you to touch on too is specifically what services you're using AI for in your platform. So I know you mentioned Azure OpenAI. Is there any other services that have worked really well for Crowdbotics?
Yeah, so I'll mention both AI and non-AI services. So obviously we use some of the core infrastructure inside Azure very extensively. So AKS, Azure Kubernetes Services, Azure SQL for Postgres, Azure Monitoring, these are kind of the foundational building blocks of how our applications are built and running. Azure OpenAI is one of the most extensively used frameworks that we've got and made good use of. Up and down the stack. We've also used a number of other adjacent systems. Probably the most interesting that I'll point to is the Agents framework, which from Azure's perspective is actually, I think, a little bit insightful, how quickly that framework came out and how sophisticated it was even in the early days, which has been terrific to see. Obviously, the AI ecosystem is moving increasingly towards an agentic model. Crowdbotics, as its ensemble approach has kind of established for us, ends up making good use of those agents simply because so much more autonomous processing can happen in places where you don't have to think about directing those agents explicitly. And that's been a nice innovation that we've been able to bring into our own ecosystem and into our own customer base because Microsoft made an early bet on that agents framework that we got to take advantage of. So those are some of the best and most loved services that we make use of.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing.
So
Vrushali,
yeah. So I was going to ask about agentic framework when we were talking about the long term, and sounds like it's already here for you. Is that correct, Anand? Like you're already leveraging Crowdbotics is already leveraging that.
We are, yes. So,
Yeah.
some of the things that we think about here, I'll just give you a quick snapshot of how Crowdbotics ends up
Yeah.
processing a code base, right? So, a lot of the magic that people expect from AI systems comes from what we call single shotting a system, right? Meaning we hand in a code base and you expect to get something out on the other end that is a complete, accurate reverse engineering of that code base into human readable language, right? So that's what Crowdbotics delivers as the output. But a default reasoning model actually can't do that very well because there's so much complexity in a code base. Lots of files, you don't know what they do, lots of complex spaghetti code that you've got to traverse and understand. So Crowdbotics divides this up into a group of agents that we can use the agents framework to invoke and work with. To simplify it, we have agents that will read the code, agents that will compare the code, agents that will write requirements, and agents that will check the requirements. We've also got agents to do various kinds of testing and validation back and forth, which is how you can get substantially higher accuracy on the other end, as opposed to just trying to pass everything into a single call and saying, please figure out all the steps to reverse engineer a code base, which most reasoning engines just will choke on. And so that's where the agents framework has been really nice for us because we can do things around putting together many of the building blocks that we need for each of these systems to play nice together and invoke one another in the appropriate places.
You are definitely ahead of the pack. I got to tell you that. That's so exciting to hear that you're already onboarding onto agentic framework, autonomous, right? Like all of those things that we did envision as part of Microsoft. It's like going and heading towards physical AI. And this is like a step towards that. And so it's really exciting to hear that. You touched on this briefly when you highlighted why Azure and why Microsoft security. When our customers are using Crowdbotics or any other, for example, like any other tool that they might be using, whenever they have to input code base, whenever it's their proprietary data set, that definitely concerns them. What are some of the things, guardrails, security pieces that you incorporate as part of Crowdbotics, which gives them the peace of mind of like, it's your code, right? Like we had this big bullets when we rolled out Azure OpenAI. Your data is your data. We are not going to train on your data. Like, and we repeated that like 10 times to every customer we met because it was so new. What are some of the things that you want to share with our audience here to give them that peace of mind?
Well, so we've had that same question and that same set of conversations with customers many times.
Yes.
And we end up giving some of the same answers, even if we have to repeat them, which is, I think, the place where the market is where we want to be because we want customers to know that we do not train on their code and we do not really touch their code if we can help it. So what this means for us is the following. A typical customer will have one or more layers of security assurances depending on what their security posture is and what the nature of their code base is. So for some customers, they say, well, we want to be entirely on tenant, meaning no code can ever leave our VPC, right? Nothing leaves our perimeter. Great. For those customers, we're happy to spin up and deploy into their Azure private tenant or into their VPC. And in those cases, no code leaves their perimeter and they're running on their own isolated instance with their own isolated invocations of relevant Azure AI services, which is a very strong level of security. We even see some customers ask to do that in an air-gapped context, which takes a little extra context of a work, but it's certainly something we're able to support. Then you've got lots of customers who are comfortable with operating within the confines of GitHub, which is where we very typically end up seeing customers choose to analyze code. Why GitHub? Well, GitHub is the de facto for a lot of customers who are running and managing code in ways that are secure, even for confidential code. In those cases, Crowdbotics has a GitHub application that we deploy in and which customers can install and invoke directly. And in those cases, the same assurances apply. We never train on customer code, and code is only really analyzed inside GitHub. So those are the kinds of assurances that we end up giving customers, and it really depends on where their security posture is. Many customers are happy to use our SaaS instance and simply consume code inside their own GitHubs, which is, I think, the way that a lot of AI tools work. And then we've got lots of other customers who say, just take me straight on tenant, give me something inside my own Azure instance, and they check out through the marketplace, or we deploy directly into a private tenant. Azure does have a great security model for stuff like this in ways that customers already understand by default, which is really nice. I will say one of the secret advantages that we have experienced as a startup in the pre-working with Azure as a partner world and the post-Azure working as a partner world, our security questions become a lot simpler when customers recognize that we are available through Azure Marketplace and that we can be provisioned in their Azure instances, because so many other services follow this nice default security model that Azure puts into place. So that's been a pleasant change to see.
That's fantastic. So you meet the customer where they're at. Whatever they need, you will be able to tailor to their security requirements and be able to help them still
That's
continue
right.
this journey.
Yeah, and I think the thing to note here is a lot of organizations are still understanding what their AI security posture needs to be. And I think
100%.
they're going to understand the right answers to this within, let's call it 24 months. The market is going to normalize around an accepted set of best practices in ways that make this a lot easier for everyone. But in the meantime, we are happy to encourage customers to run through whatever they consider to be their most difficult default security questions, and we are happy to meet them where they are.
That's fantastic. So I'm a seller, and so is similar to Raquel and so many other sellers. Like, what should they be listening to when they're talking to the customers where they feel like Crowdbotics would be a great fit to bring
Yeah,
in?
it's actually really simple if you're an Azure seller to know when you should be recommending Crowdbotics. And the answer is this, right? If your customer is saying we have to migrate from X to Y, and we have to do it in a short timeline, and we are worried about how expensive it's going to be, those are the simple magic words that simply say, well, look, you can knock off 6 months to 2 years and 1 million to 10 million of the cost of this migration, depending on your size, simply by using this AI tool to pre-process the code base and pull out the requirements. That is the short version of where you say, yes, use Crowdbotics. And that works for mainframe code. It also works for legacy existing code, right? We see customers do this for PHP or for legacy Java or legacy .NET or really any of the modern frameworks that are just out of date. So that's often the place where Crowdbotics is injected in, because a migration is the obvious place where nobody wants to spend all of this upfront time and energy migrating code just by getting the requirements out, because the requirements capture is not where the value is. The value shows up when you're actually, running on new code. The other place that we can be useful, and we see a lot of customers who are in this position, is customers who are doing maintenance on existing legacy code. And there's a lot of customers where, for whatever reason, it's not realistic to move off of this old code. You are going to stay on this old code for the foreseeable future. That's fine. You can still substantially reduce your cost of maintenance and upkeep on that code by doing the same thing. So if you are extracting out the requirements for that existing code base, suddenly a lot of your maintenance activities get a lot simpler. And this was a result we actually published jointly with Microsoft and with GitHub Next, where we found that if you pre-process the code base with requirements, you pull out the requirements, then all of your maintenance AI tools, things like GitHub Copilot, can actually give you substantially better predictions of how the code base, how to write tickets for that code base, how to process pull requests for that code base. Our customers end up seeing something like a 50% reduction in costs by using requirements to accelerate their AI development. So it's a substantial improvement. So those are the two places where, as a seller, if I were in a seller's shoes, I would pay attention when customers are saying, "Hey, I want to migrate, and I need to figure out ways to do that faster, cheaper, better." And think about getting value more quickly than the 6 months it takes to understand a system's requirements.
That's fantastic. I definitely will be connecting with Raquel to get connected with Crowdbotics for some of my customers, for sure. So thank you for walking us through that. If our audience wants to learn more about Crowdbotics, where should they go?
So they can check us out, crowdbotics.com. They can also find us in the Azure Marketplace under the name Crowdbotics. They can also feel free to email me directly, and I'm always happy to point folks in the right direction. My LinkedIns are open, and I'm on it at crowdbotics.com. So always happy to talk to folks inside Microsoft's broader ecosystem about what we can do together.
That's fantastic. Okay, before we wrap up, I do want to kind of take a quick minute and acknowledge for the audience, you probably, of course, you don't know, this session was scheduled to be recorded a few days ago, and there was hail, windstorm. It took out the power lines in my area, and there was no way for me to even, the data plan was not working. And, I really appreciate, Anand, your time, and Raquel, your time to kind of make this happen, and the rest of the production team, Crowdbotics team, Brenna, everybody else, to make this happen in such a quick turnaround. Thank you so much for being flexible and being here. If there are any final words, Raquel, from your side or on your side that you want to kind of parlay to our audience before we wrap up, please go ahead.
Thanks for joining today, Anand. It's always a pleasure working with you and your team. I'll just add to, Crowdbotics is always adding really exciting features and integrations with Microsoft. And so even on the pre-sales process, I think as you're working with customers to look into migrations, there's a fantastic opportunity to use Crowdbotics for the requirements gathering and even scoping what potential costs could look like. So please feel free to connect with me as well. I'm happy to offer insights, and looking forward to the continued partnership. Thanks again, Anand.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Vrushali. And thank you, Brenna. Thanks for a great discussion. Looking forward to more future collaborations.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thank you to our audience for listening and tuning in. I'll see you next time with another great episode. See ya. Thanks for listening to the Tech Innovators Spotlight podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Want to learn more about the AI innovations discussed? Visit techinnovatorsspotlight.com for more resources and insights from Microsoft and our technology partners. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to uncover the stories that are shaping the future of AI.